Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Minstrel's Ballad, Nidhogg's Rage, also known as Nidhogg Extreme. This is the brand new primal made available by patch 3.3 Revenge of the Horde. My name is Nidhogg and I'll be your primal guide. We begin by pulling and tanking Nidhogg in the center of the room, with the raid stacked up behind him in preparation for some easy dodging. In dragon form, Nidhogg has a large cleave that should be avoided by everyone but the main tank. He will also cast Deafening Bellow, a raid-wide AoE that needs to be healed through. Nidhogg will fly up and we begin the first dodge dance. The raid will stack in the center of the room while looking around the arena, locating Nidhogg. Nidhogg will eventually dive bomb in front of him across the room from that location, killing anything in his path with CAUTERIZE. CAUTERIZE will cover one half of the platform, leaving the other half as a safe zone, or he will CAUTERIZE the very middle of the platform, leaving smaller safe zones on either side. Before that happens, multiple HORRID roar AoEs will spawn under random players. Standing in these will debuff players with hysteria, causing them to run around aimlessly. Avoid these at all cost. The raid stacks in the center to bait HORRID roar in a small area, allowing the maximum amount of space to spread for the next set of damage. At the same time, 4 players will be marked targets for player-specific HORRID roars, which will hit as large AoE damage blasts. As soon as the ground HORRID roar indicators go out, all players will spread into the safe zone away from CAUTERIZE, taking care to stay away from marked players. The marked players will need to spread to avoid splashing extra damage on each other. Once all of these abilities hit, players will collapse back into the center to bait the next set of ground HORRID roars, all while finding Nidhogg's next CAUTERIZE position. Again, once the ground markers show up, players will spread themselves around the safe zone until CAUTERIZE and the AoE blasts go off. Nidhogg will then plop back down and the fight will resume. He'll do the same cleave and AoE damage here, but will add one mechanic to his repertoire: hot appendages. If he casts Hot Tail, the area through the very center of Nidhogg will be dangerous, and players will need to move away to avoid high damage and a burn debuff. If he casts Hot Wing, nowhere is safe except that area through the very middle of Nidhogg. Players need to be on the lookout for the appropriate cast, or each ability's respective visual cue, and move accordingly. In between these casts, he'll also throw out some ground HORRID roars at random players. Be careful not to stand on these as you move to avoid the next Hot Tail or Wing. At 80%, Nidhogg will be pushed into the next phase. He will disappear again and spawn 3 adds. The Shadow Brobenak will deal high physical damage while placing a stacking physical damage vulnerability up debuff on its tank. The Shadow FALAK will deal high magic damage while also placing a stacking magic vulnerability up debuff on its tank. The Shadow Dragon cannot be tanked and will run around the room, targeting random players with its Ripper Claw cleave attack or the furthest player with its Fireball attack. Getting hit by any of his abilities will put up a damage down debuff on you. Avoid these as necessary. Having a player assigned to be the furthest player to bait the Fireball attack allows the rest of the group to tunnel their damage on the 2 tanked adds, moving only if the Shadow Dragon gets within melee range for a cleave. The Shadow Brobenak will place a disease on its tank if it's not destroyed fast enough, and I recommend all players focus it down first. Tanks will need to cool down appropriately through each debuff stack application. Once the Brobenak is down, this tank will need to provoke the Shadow FALAK, as the previous tank will not be able to survive its next attacks with higher stacks of the debuff. Once the FALAK is down, players can switch to the Dragon, ensuring they dodge his attacks as necessary. This Dragon will roar, applying a damage vulnerability stack on all players. Getting hit by any of his abilities during this time will kill you, so be extra careful. All 3 adds must be destroyed before Nidhogg casts Mortal Chorus, or you will wipe during the ultimate. Mortal Chorus will knock back players and remove their stack of vulnerability. Immediately after, with a bunch of flashy lights, Nidhogg will cast Final Chorus, shield and heal through this ultimate as necessary. At this point, Nidhogg will turn into his Dragoon form and the fight resumes. He maintains his cleave and players will need to be careful not to stand in front of him. After 2 cleaves, 4 players will be targeted for high jump with these massive red AoE markers. These players will spread over the southern edge of the arena, careful not to overlap damage. High jump will leave behind purple puddles that will inflict bleed on any player that touches them. As soon as high jump goes off, the affected players will run back towards the center of the room. 4 GEIRSKOGULs, these massive column AoEs, will target 4 people and 1 player will be targeted for Soul Tether. Everyone will need to dodge the GEIRSKOGUL column attacks, while the off tank will grab the Soul Tether from the affected player and move it away from others in a safe zone. Soul Tether will eventually do high AoE damage on the tank, so be sure not to stand anywhere near them. After this wombo combo, the main tank and healers need to be ready for Ala Morn, a heavy hitting tank buster. Cooldown through this appropriately. At this point, Nidhogg will spawn 2 adds, his Claw and his Fang. The Claw will create red tethers between it and random players, while the Fang will create blue tethers. The Claw can only only be damaged when players with the red tether take damage themselves. The Fang can be damaged normally, however should any blue tethered player take damage, the Fang will heal itself based on the amount of damage taken. The Fang is also slowly casting self-destruct, and will wipe the raid if it's not destroyed before the cast goes off. To handle this phase, everyone with blue needs to ensure they are not taking any avoidable damage. This includes the main tank, and a tank swap will be necessary if the main tank is tethered blue. 3 blue Flare Star orbs will spawn around the room that will slowly move towards the Fang. These orbs must be popped by red players only. When Nidhogg casts Eye of the Tyrant, only the affected player and tethered red players must stack to share the damage. While this is happening, the main tank will need to handle another tank buster. Be ready with the cooldowns and heals. The tethers will reapply at this time, so pay attention to what you're tethered to and handle the mechanics appropriately. Tanks will need to swap again if necessary. Once all adds are down, Nidhogg will resume his normal attacks. The tank will have to deal with 2 more tank busters and 1 more cleave before the next wombo combo. At this point, 4 towers will spawn in the center of the room, and the 2 healers will both get marked for high dive. Each tower must be occupied to avoid high damage, and you should assign specific players for each one. Each tower will also leave behind a fire puddle that will apply a burn debuff. These AoEs will hit at the same time as the high jump AoE hits the healers. Both healers will be targeted by soul tether immediately after, and each tank needs to be ready to grab it from them. To ensure smooth handling of this combo of mechanics, you should have a pair of 1 tank and 1 healer moving to a specific corner and its adjacent tower. This way, each tank will be close to their respective healer and able to pick up soul tether immediately. While they do this, 2 assigned damage dealers will take the 2 other towers, and the other 2 spread out in preparation for all of the AoE combos. Another 4 high jump targets will be marked up, and players need to spread away from each other and the tanks with soul tether to avoid excess damage. Once these abilities hit, players will have to dodge GEIRSKOGUL as necessary, while also on the lookout for super jump, which will be somewhere on the edge of the platform with that usual pulsing distance marker. Once GEIRSKOGUL hits, players need to ensure they're as far away from super jump as possible to avoid excess damage. Another cleave into another tank buster into 1 more cleave, and Nidhogg will disappear again, dealing AoE damage when he returns for his next CAUTERIZE somewhere on the edge of the platform. Players will again stack in the center to bait HORRID Roar while looking for the safe zone. Once the markers go out, they'll spread as necessary in the safe zone, avoiding CAUTERIZE and not overlapping HORRID Roar. Nidhogg will return to the arena and the final phase will begin. He will immediately cast Akmorn, and all players must stack to share this damage. Each subsequent cast of Akmorn from now on will do 1 extra hit of damage, and this acts as a soften rage, as eventually Akmorn will hit so much that it won't be possible to heal through. However, if you've met all the DPS checks so far, you won't have this problem. Nidhogg will also begin stacking Bitter Hate on the main tank, and eventually a tank swap will be necessary. Next up, SABLE price orbs will spawn in a specific pattern. After a short time, these orbs will explode, dealing plus-shaped damage across the platform, similar to super bombs in Alexander 5 Savage. Let's look at the first pattern of SABLE price orbs. The 2 clumps in either corner will spawn first, and a short while after, the center clump will spawn. These will explode in the same order that they drop down. Before these explode, players will have to deal with Hot Wing and HORRID Roar. Since we have very little room to work with, we want to bait HORRID Roar in an area away from where we'll stack to avoid the first set of SABLE price explosions. To do this, we stack on the main tank, essentially in the path of one of the corner SABLE price orbs. This position will keep us safe from Hot Wing, and once the HORRID Roar ground markers go off, each player will move to the center of the room until the corner orbs explode. Once they do, each player will run to an assigned corner, spreading out their HORRID Roar markers as necessary and avoiding the SABLE price orb explosions from the center of the room. Assigning 2 players per corner will give everyone ample room to spread for each mechanic. Immediately after, players will collapse back into the center to share the next Akmorn. At this point, the main tank will have roughly 4 or 5 stacks of Bitter Hate, and these Akmorn stacks are an easy area for tank swapping. Immediately after Akmorn, he will cleave again, so the new tank will have to take care to turn Nidhogg away from the raid. A few more cleaves and AoE blasts to heal through before the next set of SABLE price orbs spawn. This pattern will spawn each set at a time, with the first set always being in the center. The raid will move to the corner of the last set of orbs to spawn to bait HORRID Roar. Once the ground markers go off, players will move away from them while waiting for the center orbs to explode. Once they do, all players will move into the center to avoid the explosions of each set of corner orbs. During this time, Nidhogg will be casting Hot Tail. Ideally, you can dodge both Nidhogg and each set of explosions by moving to the correct sides, but if your group is having trouble with this, stacking in the center of Nidhogg and accepting the Hot Tail damage is an option. The healing requirement of 1 burn stack is much less than if a player makes an error and gets hit by more than one Sable price explosion. The next Akmorn will hit here, and another tank swap will be necessary around this time. At this point, the phase will repeat, with the Sable price or patterns and ability combos looping until the boss is destroyed. And there you have it, Nidhogg Extreme. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.